A very good morning to you all, our viewers. Welcome to yet another edition of The Other Perspective. This is a space where we interrogate the thing behind the thing behind the thing. So, my name is Annette Chiravo. I'll be your host for today's show. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, I would like to encourage you to do so, as well as our other social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For today's show, our topic is understanding the growing cost of democracy on taxpayers. And just to give us a brief background, um, recently in the papers, we had a release where uh, it was revealed that the Electoral Commission report highlighted that the number of politically elected leaders has increased from over 1.3 million in 2016 to over 1.6 million in 2021. Uganda's Electoral Commission also spent over 419 billion shillings in 2016 in organizing 2016 general elections, and subsequently in 2021 we see that that number grew to a tune of 698 0.6 billion in 2021 for organizing general elections. So we see that over time, in different years, we see that the cost of democracy has gradually been increasing. We also see that the number of MPs growing gradually. It has increased, as well as the number of districts. Specifically with MPs, we see that in 2010, in the year 2010, 2011, we had 375 MPs, and then 2016 we had 427 MPs, and we see that number skyrocketing to over 529 MPs. What does this mean to our democracy in this country? And today's show, with me on set, I have three gallant hosts, and I'll introduce them. First, I'll introduce Mr. Henry Muguzi. Henry Muguzi is an electoral democracy expert with a wealth of knowledge and information in this area. We also have Mr. Eddie Kayinda. He's an economist as well as a researcher. He'll also be joining us shortly. And we have a youthful young man who's very knowledgeable as well. He's a political scientist and a researcher. His name is Abel Eser. You're very welcome, gentlemen, on the show. I'm happy to see you.
Thank you, Annette. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So with that brief background we've had, and with the topic that we have, let's delve right into our discussion for the day. So I think I'll start with you, Henry. I would like you to give us a synopsis of the cost centers for democracy in Uganda, as you have seen it evolve over the years. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Annette, and of course to our viewers who are listening, joining us from wherever you are in different parts of Africa, but also Europe and the US. It's always an honor for us to be sharing our insights with you. Now, it was an American politician, Jesse Unruh, who said at one time that money is the mother's milk of politics. Without money, we cannot conduct any activity that constitutes democracy. And therefore, money is needed for democracy. Unfortunately, democracy is not cheap. Democracy is costly. And the reason democracy is costly is that it is an aggregate of quite a number of activities. And allow me to take you through some of these. So for starters, there is something we call an election cycle. The election cycle constitutes of a number of activities. And some of these, as you know, include the legal framework. To go into an election, there are times when you have to either amend, create, or review the legal framework. So these are costly because there are allowances that legislators need. There is a process of consultation and so many other things that go into the legal framework. From there, then you go into the whole process of planning and implementing. The people that are going to conduct the election have to go and spend time planning. This is all money, training and educating voters on what to do, and educating also polling agents and the assistants, polling assistants. What about the registration of voters? That process, as you remember, is quite costly because it has to be countrywide. You have to remunerate the men and women that manage this process. What about the nomination as well? A nomination includes if it is presidential. You remember when we nominate, when a presidential candidate is nominated duly, they receive a vehicle and an escort van on which there is a police officers. These are all costs. Campaign coordination. To coordinate campaigns across the country, this is money. You understand? And there is voting operation on election day, including the printing of ballot papers, which we do in European countries. These are all very costly. The verification of results, the post-election period, which is another part of the electoral cycle, where, of course, as you would expect, there will be petitions and taxpayers have to fund these petitions. Petitions will require that the judiciary, the courts, take a fair share of the national budget in order for them to be able to hear and adjudicate these cases. But also the Electoral Commission and the Attorney General have to, and other teams of lawyers have to be hired to represent government. But that said, there are and allowances that we pay the people, that the men and women who have been elected into positions of political positions, all the way from the president to the MPs to the district councillors, sub-county councillors, the LC1 chairperson, and so on. All these people take quite a number or a lot of money. Now, the ministers, you see that when the president is elected, he does not govern alone. He governs with a team of ministers. How many do we have now? 86. All these must have vehicles, must have allowances, must have lead car, must have escort car. These are very expensive undertakings. And then you look at the whole notion of the advisors of the president. Because you have voted the president in office, he needs advisors. I think now the number is coming to 350. I think 300 there. But also there is the whole notion of funding political parties. You remember political parties that are represented in the parliament receive a share of the national cake. The money that goes into those parties. All these costs are levied and impose a burden on the taxpayer. Now, when you look around the number of districts, the number of the size of parliament, and so many others, you get to see that actually the costs are enormous, and these have been rising. If you see the graphic there, we are reminded that, for example, in 2011, we had 112 districts. In 2016, that number grew to 135. But in 2000, and as we speak now, we have 145 districts. This means that you have more MPs coming to parliament, because every time you create a district, that's a woman MP, that's blah, blah, blah. This means you have more districts that have district chairpersons and district councils that must receive remuneration, but it also must be facilitated. But then also, the more districts you have, the more you're going to have to spend in terms of the local government transfers. All of these, because districts are a creature, an offshoot of democracy. And therefore, there are quite a number of things. So the aggregate of all these constitute a figure that when you look at it, it becomes really a burden to the taxpayer. I was looking at the budget, Annette. In 2020, for financial year 2020, 2021, when we had elections, the Electoral Commission had budgeted for about 1 trillion shillings. I think that money was brought down to 849 billion, and in the end, the ministry was only able to raise 768 billion. And this money was shared between the Ministry of Internal Affairs. I think the money that went into ensuring the security, or can we flip it and say securitizing the campaigns, the money that went into the Electoral Commission, there's money that went into the Citizenship and Immigration Control Center. There's money that went into the Uganda Police Force. There's money that went into the Uganda Prison Service. There's money that went into the National Identification and Registration Authority. And then there's money that went into the Department of Government Analytical Laboratory. So all in all, you see that the Electoral Commission took the lion's share of about 657, and the rest of this money was shared. So all those institutions that have been sharing, listing some of those institutions that many our viewers did not know get to have a share of what has been allocated for election. And then for democracy, then it becomes quite a big toll on the taxpayer. Back to you, Anne.
Wow, those are really quite insightful things to bring in here. Eddie, would you jump in here from your economics perspective? What price does the taxpayer have to pay for this growing cost of democracy?
Thank you, Annette, for your invitation to this discussion. Henry makes an elaborate discussion of what it takes to host an electoral process in Uganda, or financing politics in Uganda in terms of cost. But the addition I can make onto that is that yes, we can see all this money is coming into politics and costing highly to deliver democracy in Uganda and Africa in general. But where does the money come from? In the African democracy perspective, and probably globally, we have various financing options for democracy, including the taxpayers' money. Henry mentions that government has to substantially finance political parties, the electoral management bodies, among others, in ensuring that democracy processes can take place. But also, we also know that in the Ugandan context, we have a lot of grants and donations from bilateral development partners, because one of the conditions that upon to which we must be supported as an emerging economy, as a developing economy, is that we must demonstrate that we are democratic. Therefore, they have a very big share of monies they have to put in terms of promoting democracy. You have seen the World Bank, you have seen the International Finance Corporation, you've seen the USAID and other multilateral development partners investing a lot of money into grants and donations towards democracy. But in some other issues, we also have loans. Loans in cases where we cannot finance our democracy domestically. We know that we have acquired foreign loans, and some of these loans have seen their way into financing some of the cost centers Henry mentioned in his preamble. But there is a current development in the Ugandan context where the private sector is coming in handy to finance politics. And these are persons that are interested in benefiting from the political processes, or they want to be on the side of government when a government either wins for an electoral seat or presidential seat, or in local governments, a chairperson is to win an electoral seat. There shall always be those private sector partners that are willing to finance either as proxies into political processes to ensure that they can be on the side of that person when he or she wins an electoral seat. But the interesting development we do have in the Ugandan context, again, is that politicians are financing their own election. You recall in the previous elections that we had in Uganda in 2021, we had lots of independent candidates. They were creating a very significant percentage of the persons that stood for elective positions. and most of these monies were financing from their own savings, from their own properties, from their own loans, among others. So some of these cost centers are financed by the politicians themselves, but also me as a citizen. When I spend money to come from my house to go to a polling station and vote and cast my ballot, I have invested in democracy. I have invested in politics. Therefore, when you're looking at the cost centers of politics in Uganda or in Africa as a whole, even globally, it's important that we also look at where does the money come from. And for me, where the money comes from and whether that money makes value on investment in politics is subject to discussion, and it takes a big stake in this discussion we are going to have this morning. Back to you, Annette.
Wow, thank you. Abel, you being a youth, a political scientist, and a researcher, would you give us the news perspective, especially on the thing?
Thank you so much, Annette, and thank you, Henry and Eddie, for your submissions. For me, I want to first of all appreciate from the background Henry has given us, where he has discussed a lot about how elections are costly and money is needed in politics. Money is a mother's milk of politics. As you gave us your background, Annette, you hinted that currently the number of political elected leaders has increased from 1,300,000 to 1.6 million in this current year. And we are seeing that a lot of money is being spent in terms of paying for these leaders to do their work. And we currently have a budget that was just passed by Parliament, the 2022-2023 budget. And we are going to see the 529 members of Parliament. They are going to expend on the legislation and oversight representation about 686 billion. 686 billion is going to be used by only Parliament. So that is all going to cost the taxpayers that money. So we should be asking ourselves, is this really relevant? Do we really need to spend all this money on this increasing number of political leaders? And if you look at the administration of justice, for example, we have seen always whenever there are issues on elections, we have always election petitions. And there was a time the permanent secretary of the judiciary, Mr. Pius Bigrimana, alluded that they spent 1.2 billion in only hearing the presidential petition of Honorable Robert Chagulanyi and President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. So if you are spending about 1.2 billion on only adjudicating on election petition or presidential electoral petition, and through our engagements and research with some of the people in the judiciary, they also told us it costs more than 20 million to only adjudicate on one election petition. So all these are costs that taxpayers incur in terms of democracy. So I think we are spending a lot as a country or in terms of democracy, and I don't know whether we really have there's value for spending a lot on such, because people are still grappling in poverty, and they think they are not being represented very well. Because first of all, if we cumulatively break down these numbers of elected leaders, we have 1.6 million, and we have a population of 44 million Ugandans. That means that each 27, okay, one leader represents about 27 Ugandans. So it's like we are overrepresented. If we have 27 Ugandans being represented by one leader, we should see that there is something being done to address the issues of those citizens. So we don't need to have a very big or bloated political and administrative structure, which costs a lot of money in terms of taking care of them, and at the end, we don't see anything coming in terms of service delivery. Yes. That's what I can give for now.
Abel, what do you think explains this growing cost of democracy? As we've mentioned earlier, you see that the numbers are increasing, especially in terms of budgeting and expenditure. For example, we see from 2016, it was at 419 billion. and then come 2021, it grows to 698. What do you think explains this increment? Back to you, Abel.
Okay, one of the things that it explains this increasing number of elective positions and also other structures which we are seeing is the continuous creation of more districts and more electoral positions by the government in power. So we really don't understand, because the narrative they always keep giving us is that the more they create more districts and more elective positions, they are trying to take leadership close to the people. But if you have 27 citizens being represented by one leader, but we still don't see any change in terms of improvement of service delivery, do we really need to continue creating more districts if even those very districts are not being financed? The cities we have created, right now they don't have money to run them effectively. They are still relying on their mother districts. So do we need to create more districts, more elective positions, just to which costs us a lot of money in terms of putting the leaders in who are supposed to politically manage those areas in power, but we don't allocate money when it comes to money that is needed for running those very administrative units. So the continuous creation of districts and administrative units is one of the reasons why we are seeing that the number is skyrocketing. But we should also not rule out that politics is right now one of the biggest earner of in Uganda. So most people put a lot of pressure to some of the leaders we have to create for them positions. It can be politically or even administrative. For example, RDCs. Some of the people we see who lose are created for positions and they end up being RDCs. So all these costs are still incurred on the taxpayers, because you find that someone has gone maybe for an election, he has lost, and they're so loyal to maybe the leaders in power, so they need to be put somewhere. So they end up creating some positions for them, and the taxpayers has all that burden to make sure that the office that is created has all the resources that is needed for that office to operate functionally. So we end up financing a lot of things which do not really translate into improving on the livelihood of Ugandans, but we are only financing things which are benefiting a few individuals.
All right, thank you very much. Henry, Abel has alluded to the fact that Ugandans, we seem to be overrepresented, where he says that the number of elected leaders today is over 1.6 million, which implies that every leader represents 27 Ugandans, or citizens rather. I would like to know your take. Do you think that we need all these leaders, especially given the fact that we don't seem to see that their representation translates into what they are supposed to do in terms of mandate and responsibility? Over to you, Henry.
Thank you very much, Annette. Quite an interesting question it is. Now, for us as political scientists, we know that studies have been conducted almost on every sphere of politics. But there has not been one study that has proved or established that there is a correlation between over-representation, or if you will, representation and the service delivery. The argument that has always been propagated by the people in power in the NRM government has always been that, look, we give you a district because then you get more services. Experience has proved the contrary. Now, so then you ask yourself the question, if creation of new districts, or if you like, districtization of democracy in Uganda, if it has not resulted into improvement in service delivery, then whose interest is it serving? And the answer is simple. Because if you look around the districts that are being created, first of all, they are too weak economically. They cannot raise the internal revenue. They have to depend on central government transfers. And by depending on central government transfers, they become perpetually beholden to the center, and therefore these have only served as instruments of patronage. It's part of the expanded patronage network, and therefore I agree with Abel that it has proven to be of no consequence. In fact, if we were to give any advice to government or to whoever will come into government, whenever that happens, one would propose that first of all we take the number of districts back to 100, and that it is enough for every district to have 2 representatives, 1 woman and 1 man, one male, 1 female, so that you have a parliament that has a maximum of 200 legislators. This is how we are going to have quality, because you see the decision on whether a road gets to be constructed the decision on whether the road from Kona Kamudini to Lira gets to be repaired or not does not require that the entire whole sub-region of Bolango has 60 MPs. 1 person, or at most 2, can be enough to present the issue on the floor of Parliament, so that the burden on the taxpayer can be reduced. And therefore, I don't agree that the creation of districts improves services, and I'm also of the view, therefore, that we need to work towards reducing these numbers, because the burden, the public administration burden of Uganda is too big. Now, if you look at the national budget, most of the money we pump into local government, I was doing research, close to 80% of the funds we send to local government are spent on payment of salaries of these of civil servants, and we leave a paltry less than 20% to finance the capital expenditure. This is wrong. You cannot take a country to middle income status when you are investing only less than 20% into capital expenditure and spending 80% on recurrent expenditure. This should change, and therefore, I think there are quite a number of things. I was also checking here the numbers. I spoke earlier about the taxpayers' money that we pump into political parties as public funding. This financial year, the Electoral Commission has already received 45 billion that is going to go into the political parties represented in Parliament, and these are for the benefit of those that don't have them on their fingertips. We have NRM that enjoys a lion's share of the numbers. We have the FDC, we have NUP. Those are 3. Number 4, we have DP, UPC, we have JEMA and PPP. There are about 6 political parties in Parliament. But of course, the formula that is going to be used is that of numerical strength. You would expect that the lion's share of the 45 billion is going to go to the party in power. And therefore, even when the idea was to kind of regurgitate and capacitate political parties, you'll find that political parties like PPP and JEMA, which have 1 legislator each, are going to get only bread crumbs. Therefore, the meaning of public funding to political parties loses consequence, because the party that is in power, that has access to everything, including being the favorite one that receives all the monies from all the campaign financiers, is still the same party that is getting the biggest chunk of the public funding to political parties. These are leaving a burden on the taxpayer and making democracy so costly, something that I think should have been avoided. Back to you, Annette.
Wow, interesting discussion here. Once again, our viewers, discussion for today, we are trying to understand the growing cost of democracy on the taxpayer in Uganda. Let's go for a brief break. We shall be right back after the break. Thank you.
Hey, why are you running? sense of collapse.
When are you leaving my house?
I think just give me 1 month. Huh? Just 1 month. I strategize and when I'm able to relocate my family.
My dear, I have given you more than enough time. I need my property.
Exactly, but
yes,
but just give me like 1 month. I find means of relocating my family because right now I don't have. I'm not very stable.
So your problem is relocating your family.
No, I need to relocate them, but also, of course, more time.
That
The
can
idea
be,
is
that can
give
be
me more
handled.
time.
Don't worry. That should be enough to settle you down.
Anyway, thank you.
What is he doing in my home?
I own this place now. Madam, you have 3 days to vacate.
What is the meaning of this, Nathan?
I'm sorry, Beatrice. I've sold this house.
Without my consent? No. I'll fight this madness.
No, Beatrice, please. Beatrice, please, Beatrice. That man is very connected. He's very powerful. Please don't. Let's not go there. Besides, he has given me a check. We can start from here. We can really start from here.
But why? Why would you do such a thing?
Beatrice, I had politics, campaigns. I need a lot of money to remain in the race.
You borrowed money from this money lender to run campaigns? Didn't I warn you from taking such a move?
We are unnecessary.
This doesn't concern you.
But I needed to save our parliamentary seat.
But you still lost. However much we invested. We are worthy 5 million? Only?
Hey, Beatrice, Mana. In politics, you fall and rise. You can lose an election.
So you believe you will rise again?
Yes, I can win again and become a parliamentarian and put my life back together. Would you write another one? Hey, Beatrice! Please, Beatrice! Please don't leave me.
Leaders like these are highly susceptible for political corruption and will not be service delivery oriented.
Welcome back, viewers, from that brief break. Our topic for today, once again, is understanding the growing cost of democracy. Before we broke off, Henry, in your discussion, you alluded to how consequential, how beneficial political party financing is, especially when the representation of political parties in parliament seems to be more skewed to one angle, or seems to be more skewed to one political party than that does not favor the others. With that there in mind, what do you think is the value? Okay, what is their value for money in financing of political parties, especially this is for you, Henry, especially the fact, given those dynamics that you mentioned earlier on. Over to you, Henry.
Thank you very much, Annette. Of course, the one thing I had forgotten when I was speaking about the Electoral Commission is that they are also they are seeking 60 billion to procure new office premises, because they must move. But back to your question, is there a value for money? You see, the intention was that political parties should receive public funding so that they can be ignited, okay, to gain strength and be used as the vehicles to propel our democracy. Now, when you look around, because of the formula that was decided and agreed upon and passed in law, it favors only the party in power. It also favors only the parties that have representatives in parliament. And yet, there are political parties that have performed very well. They have representatives at district level, at sub-county level, even more numbers than those that have one or two representatives in parliament. And therefore, the original intention of trying to kickstart political parties that had been in limbo for quite a long time doesn't seem to be working. But that said, the manner in which this money is being managed, political parties there is no system in place that requires political parties to ensure that the public funds, or if you will, the taxpayers' money that goes into these political parties is put to proper use. What we have learned over the years is that this money is also appropriated released in some form of arrears. So all the time it is coming late. It is coming at the end of the quarter. It is coming after 2 quarters. So because it is coming in arrears, the conditions that surround its management are those that are shrouded in darkness. It is never accounted for. You cannot go to any political party website or any platform and find out how much and what they used for the money. The biggest culprit is the party in power, the NRM. The records that are submitted to the Electoral Commission are not accessible to the public. The Auditor General does not audit this money. There is no value for money. I would argue that most of this money is being actually abused by the political parties that are receiving it. And when they receive it, they treat it as some form of bonanza, or if you like, handshake. And therefore they feast on it at the expense of the taxpayer. As we have said, the Electoral Commission has now received 45 billion, and these are already grazing their hands and waiting their appetites to feast on the money. So I don't see value for money because political parties remain as weak as they were. Political parties are event-based. When there are no elections, they don't swing into action. They always give excuses that the regime is ruthless. But we know they're not doing enough. They're not being creative enough. And so for me, so far, with what we have seen, there is no value for money yet. For me as a taxpayer, my pain is in learning that this money goes into political parties and is received as some sort of a bonanza. They feast on it without accountability. There is nothing, no provision in law that requires, for example, that guides on how this money is going to be managed, accounted for. How can we live in situations like these? So that's my take, Annette.
Yes, well, from the discussions that we're having, Eddie, it's coming out so clearly that we seem to be spending a lot on democracy. I would like to know your view. What is the value addition of this kind of spending, and does it make Uganda any more democratic anyway? What is your take, Eddie?
Thank you, Annette, for this. Now, when we are understanding cost of democracy in Uganda, I want us to understand two things. Uganda's democracy is costly in terms of the amount of money that is being invested in politics and electoral processes. That is number one. But also, it is costly because we are trying to bite more than what we can chew. In many cases, you've seen the Electoral Commission coming up to say that in spite of the amount of money being given as the electoral management body to finance electoral processes and monitor and deliver them, we still have no sufficient amount of money to deliver a rightful or uncontestable electoral race among the parliamentary, presidential, and even at local government. So the activities are so much more than what we can finance. So we're trying to look at cost in terms of inadequate amount of money that we do have to finance politics, but also cost in terms of the cost of delivery is so much compared to the outcomes that we are supposed to get out of democratic processes. But secondly, when you look at it from the policy, from the fiscal policy perspective, we know that the major drivers of a fiscal policy in order for government, like Uganda, to get money are majorly four. One, there must be an adequate tax base where Ugandans can be able to substantially contribute towards paying tax that provide financing for government, from which finances they're supposed to get money for democracy. But you know that only in Uganda's tax environment, a 10-90% policy rule thrives. Where you find that only about 10% of the individuals, of the organizations, of the corporations pay only pay money that finances 90% of the whole economy. So in such a kind of thing, you cannot expect that a country, an economy like Uganda can get substantial amount of money to finance democracy. Secondly, there must be a good government expenditure. When government spends on the population, when government spends on the citizenry, we are increasing the amount of disposable income, of the amount of investment the citizenry has, in order for us to contribute towards monies that can finance democracy. Thirdly, when you look at the public debt, if you have looked at the Uganda's budget 2020 to 2023, about 15 trillion is going to be used for debt refinancing. This is about 40% of the budget. Now, you ask yourself, if 40% of the budget is going to debt refinancing or debt financing, what is going to happen to the rest of the cost centers, including democracy? And lastly, if you look at the national budget, again, you're going to find that the national budget is skewed towards more of consumptive spending than investment spending. Whereas most of the persons were very eager to know that, for example, the parish development model has come up and people are going to invest. In the recent allocations, the permanent secretary mentioned that we have not allocated money for the parish development model because we are not sure whether we can get that money. Now, if government is not spending on its citizenry, where are we going to get an adequate tax base to ensure that we can finance our democracy and democracy-related costs? At the end of the day, we are going to find out that the figures that we do have are not commensurate with what we earn. And I can give you another example. I was reviewing the current budget figures 2022-2023. I found out the following. Governance and security is taking 6.4 trillion shillings out of the budget that we do have. Administration of justice is taking about 389 billion shillings. Digital transformation is taking about 217 billion. Then regional development is taking about 1.6 trillion. Public service transformation, public transformation is taking about 207 trillion, and legislation, oversight, and representation is taking 686 billion Ugandan shillings. Where is the money for human capital development? Because when we demonstrate that we're investing in democracy, that democracy must translate into better service delivery, better representation, and better ideas on the floor of parliament or the floor of councils, wherever the case might be. But to answer your question directly, I want you to relate this to Uganda, that we have invested a lot of money in Uganda, but has the desperation within the communities, within the electorate reduced? Can we see poor people reducing in numbers? In any case, they are they're increasing. Can we see the effects of COVID-19 receding? In any case, we're increasing. Can we have? Are we seeing a hungry electorate receding? Are we seeing a captured legislature receding? Apparently, we do have a legislature that is captured, and it does not work based on its consent, but on the consent of the captor. We are looking at lack of credible laws that regulate financing and accountability of public funds, for example, that those that go to political parties. Most importantly, we are seeing political parties actually behaving like parties in a marketplace. We do not have an accountability mechanism. We do not have a reporting mechanism. We do not have a system that keeps a political party in check and balance. So you can see that the whole system has been turned upside down, despite the amount of money that is being invested through electoral processes. And lastly, to answer your question, the question is: are we getting value for money? Is Uganda more democratic as a result of the offshore of investing in democracy? The answer could be picked from one of the following. Do we have better representation? How many ideas we see on the floor of parliament, for example? How many bylaws and ordinances are being delivered by the local councils and the district councils at higher level and lower level that do favor the persons that they are representing? How many ideas have you seen most of these politicians presenting on the floor of parliament? Out of the 529 MPs that we do have in the current parliament, how many of them have you seen come on the floor of, even in the media, present issues that do matter about the plight of the people? How many of them have delivered appropriate development and appropriation of their constituencies and even their communities that we do have? If we do have the budget allocated about 6.9 trillion into human capital development, including agriculture, including education, but including health systems, we are ready to see how much education is going to improve and how much health is going to improve. At the end of the day, like one of my friends mentions, this is a regime survival enterprise and we cannot see value, and Uganda is not more democratized than what we should be, depending on how much we have invested in this democracy in Uganda. I want to thank you, Annette. Back to you.
Wow, it is clear from the discussion that a lot needs to be done, especially given the fact that if we are spending that much money, it should really manifest in some form of better representation or better accountability or service provisioning and the like. So having had that discussion, Abel, I'll come to you. What do you think Uganda should do to see a difference, or to reduce the growing cost of democracy, or rather to see a difference in our leadership? Over to you.
Since we don't have enough time, I will only say it's very simple. What Uganda just needs to do is to cut the bloated political and administrative structures that we already have. That will save us a lot of money in terms of the number of leaders we have in parliament, local government, the number of appointments made by the president for RDCs, presidential advisors, and all those. We don't need that big number. We just need a small number of committed politicians and civil servants who are patriotic about their country, and all they do is they do things which see that their country progresses. But the problem that we have a lot of persons or personnel who are in politics and also technocracy. Some of them are appointed because of their loyalty to the powers that be, but they don't really mean to serve Uganda. That's why we find that despite the increasing costs of democracy, we are citizens are paying a lot of money in terms of sustaining and facilitating democracy in Uganda, but we are not seeing the reduction in terms of human rights abuses. We are not seeing a number of responsive and accountable leaders increase. Also, the status of our democratic institutions is questionable in terms of their independence and strength. So we need, if we are to invest, we need to see that there are changes in some of these things. We need to see human rights abuses reducing. We need to build strong and independent democratic institutions and ensure that the leaders we produce are responsive and accountable to the citizens. But if you don't see this and we are still expending a lot of money on democracy, then I don't see any value in it. So we need to scale down on the number of these bloated political and administrative structures.
Thank you, Abel. And I'll take those to be your parting shots. Over to you, Henry. Would you, in these few minutes we have remaining, would you give us your parting shots on this?
I thought to have about 10 minutes to go on it. If I see the clock clearly. Yeah, but the point he's making is this, that I think citizens must understand that democracy is never cheap. And what is the alternative to democracy? We have tested the alternative. The alternative is to plunge into chaos. You have a regime that will come here and govern by decree, and a few men will return to the bush. I hope there are still bushes left or forests left, because as last time I checked, they had cleared all of them. And then you have anarchy. So when you reflect on those, then you cannot help but conclude that democracy is still expensive, but democracy is a better option compared to the other militant options. And therefore, what we have to do is to make sure that we develop a form of democracy that works for the people, a democracy that fits our income. I was very encouraged when I discovered that in Gambia, they use marble or pieces of stone. They go and pick them up there. They use drums. This whole notion of spending billions of money going out to print ballot papers and then shipping them can be avoided. Of course, I have heard the president has been advocating for an electronic voting system. If that were to be in place again, it would reduce on the amount of money that we are spending on democracy. But the point I want to reinforce is the point Abel made, the point of bloated democracy institutions. The parliament filled with 557 people, MPs, where you're going to give each MP less than 2 minutes to speak. What kind of point can you make in 2 minutes? What kind of researched opinion can you present in 2 minutes? So this has diminished Parliament into an arena for political dramatist persona, so that they just stand up to be seen, to be talking, whereas talking nothing. And therefore, I think we need to bring it down. We don't need that size of parliament. We don't need that size of presidential advisors. Many of them will spend the entire term in office without even seeing the president. We don't need that. We don't need 86 ministers, cabinet ministers, some of which, excuse me, you will see on TV and you wonder they're minister of which country. And then you are reminded, oh, of Uganda. And then you are like, where has this person been? You have never seen them. These are all increasing the cost of public administration. They're increasing the cost of democracy. I think it's important to get on the drawing board. I think it's important to rethink the kind of democracy we want to have, but most importantly, to understand that there is no correlation between the numbers and quality of services. In fact, you will have better quality of services if we had fewer numbers in parliament, fewer numbers of presidential advisors, fewer numbers of districts, fewer numbers of ministers, fewer numbers of everything. Because in this world, you don't need a whole what is it called, battalion of people to make a decision. That is my take. Back to you, Annette.
Yeah, thank you very much, Henry. Eddie, would you give us your parting shots as well?
Annette, thank you so much. You know, the Ugandan brand of democracy is a copy and paste from the developed world, and that brand of democracy we do have is a precondition for development financing when you look at it from the economic perspective, that you either indicate to us that you are implementing this type of democracy, or recede in terms of financing. And for me, it has proved to be too costly for us because we cannot afford. It's better for now that in Africa, and in particular, we identify, become more frugal in trying to finance politics that makes Africa better, but also Uganda better. Can we reduce on the representation in order for us to reduce the costs of administration and management of political processes? But also, can we prioritize? If you ask, why would we hold an election for already a predetermined electoral outcome using Kayunga as an excuse? Why did we have to have elections in Kayunga when they had already determined who the winner will be? To me, I think that is a waste of time in Africa. And for as long as we continue to have a failed democracy in terms of managing costs and in terms of having expectations of the population or citizenry, coups in Africa are not about to end. The recent one being Burkina Faso, Gambia, Guinea, most of those West African countries, and some in South Africa and North Africa have had coups. I'm scared whether that should not come to Uganda and maybe other East African countries because of the cost of democracy that we are having here in Africa and in Uganda in particular. And lastly, I would strongly advise that let's expand the revenue basis, because like I mentioned at the beginning, we are costly because we don't have the financial wherewithal. So if we have an expansionary fiscal policy that brings money into the population, brings money into investment, probably we can identify a bigger financial base to finance the bloated democracy processes. And in this case, if you don't do that, then we are not about to develop democracy in Uganda and Africa as a whole. I want to thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And once again, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me on the show. Once again, I've been Annette, your host. And of course, discussions such as this cannot be exhausted in 1 hour. So we encourage you, our viewers, to continue the discussion on our various social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and you can also comment on our YouTube channel as well as LinkedIn. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See you next time.